The Muppets at Walt Disney World is a television special that premiered on NBC on May 6, 1990, and follows Kermit and the gang sneaking into the Mouse's domain, where they then proceed to split up while being chased around the parks by security. Throughout the special, the characters experience various attractions until they eventually gain an audience with Mickey Mouse, where they exchange philosophies and are welcomed into the Disney family, signing their names in front of the Chinese Theatre, home of the Great Movie Ride. The special is 47 minutes of excellent brand synergy, promising classic Muppet antics while also advertising the thrills and entertainment of Disney World, which at the time was celebrating its 19th year in operation. This production was envisioned as a way to introduce the Muppet characters to the Disney brand, cementing a planned merger of the two being negotiated by Jim Henson and Disney CEO Michael Eisner that had been ongoing. Unfortunately, none of this would come into being, because 10 days after the special premiered on May 16, 1990, Jim Henson passed away, leaving behind an incredible legacy and a band of misfits without their leader. Initially, I had intended to make a quick video analysing the special as though it were a glimpse into a world where Disney took ownership of the Muppets with Jim still at the helm, joking that it really shouldn't exist at all. Around the time I was planning to work on that video, I was a few short weeks away from attending MomoCon in Atlanta, during which I also took a trip to Georgia's Center for Puppetry Arts, which is an experience I am still not over. And while getting to see some of my favourite creations ever in the felt was an utter joy, this excursion also allowed me to pick up the acclaimed Jim Henson biography by Brian J. Jones, which would be useful for research. However, this book made me reconsider the way I go about discussing the Muppets, and caused me to push this video back even further as I now had to rethink its entire premise. I always assumed I had a strong sense of who Jim Henson was as a person from all the interviews and various think pieces I've gone through over the years, but I had merely grown up with Jim Henson, the idea. The Cinderella story of an altruistic man who persevered through adversity until he achieved everything he wanted. In spending a week poring over the pages of this book, I was confronted by the complexities and spectrum of Jim Henson the person. It made me reconsider how a lot of Muppet fans tend to deify their creator, something I've been guilty of. I've made several videos in which I have, even unintentionally, placed him on a pedestal, which isn't something I want to do anymore, especially if I'm going to start making videos about projects he worked on. So the idea of creating a video on this special and assigning it this grand importance of a glimpse into the future that never was, didn't make sense anymore. Instead, I simply want to talk about a fun piece of Muppet media I greatly enjoy and reflect on what it has to say about the characters at this point in their history. Before we can address all that though, we first have to understand the circumstances that brought this special into existence. Part 1. A Frog's Folly. The year was 1989. Following the internationally celebrated Muppet Show and a trilogy of commercially successful films, the Muppets had grown into an inescapable worldwide phenomenon, which might have surprised the creator of the colourful cast of weirdos, as Jim Henson once thought his innovations in the field of puppetry would be a footnote in his story, considering them as simply his way to get into television, his real ambition. As his company expanded and Jim was slowly transformed into a public figure, he began taking progressively more responsibility when it came to the business side of things. While Jim could be a rather tenacious businessman, negotiating with clients and fighting to keep the rights of any characters his company created, that wasn't who he was. He didn't care for dealing with the finances because money was never a concern to him. He just wanted to create, and for his creations to maintain his integrity and ethos. If Jim or the Muppets wanted to go only after the money, we could have truly cleaned up. I can't tell you how many cookie manufacturers wanted Cookie Monster to pitch their product. In April, NBC would premiere a new show, The Jim Henson Hour. Originally conceived as a vehicle for Jim to showcase new experimental works and innovations his team were making, executive meddling turned it into a half-baked, unfocused mess of a variety show that fell flat upon its premiere. Though it wasn't the show's failure itself that troubled Jim, it was the realization of how quickly audiences could turn on even his most beloved characters. This wasn't the Dark Crystal baffling audiences or Labyrinth landing with a thud. This was a project with Kermit at the centre, and for the first time, Kermit was flopping. Jim's divided attention had been causing conflicts at his company for a while, but this was the first time that had seeped into one of their projects, which was the final straw. He wanted to hand over the business and financial side of his company so that he could dedicate himself to simply creating. Part 2. That goddamned deal. A lifelong admirer of Disney's animated features and a frequent attendant of the theme parks, Jim sought to sell his company to the Magic Kingdoms in the hopes of freeing him from the constant board meetings and financial responsibilities that he felt were dragging down his focus and creativity, which was now starting to become evident in his output. He had actually previously attempted to get Disney involved with Henson Associates, which hadn't panned out, with Jim even turning down offers from other companies because he specifically wanted Disney. The timing this go around could not have been more perfect. Disney was recovering from a creative lull that nearly left the company unsustainable, narrowly avoiding a hostile takeover only a few years prior. While they had recently started releasing movies that excited audiences and turned a profit again, the idea of acquiring characters as marketable and reliable as the Muppets would not only give them another leg to stand on, but hopefully inject the company with the innovation and creative energy they had been lacking. Though while the Muppets were a nice bonus, it was Jim himself they wanted. For years, Jim had been fighting off growing comparisons to Walt Disney from the media and the public simply because he never wanted to be Disney. He didn't want to build an empire, he just wanted to make things. He was a very good businessman, but that isn't what he cared about. He cared about the work, he cared about what it meant to the world, and he cared about making new art grow and develop. But there was more to this than bringing his focus back to creative endeavors. He wanted his creations to be truly immortal, lasting beyond him and their original performers. And seeing how Disney had been able to keep their characters alive long after the death of Walt Disney, as well as what they'd done taking care of other people's works with their own versions of A.A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh, it all seemed like a perfect fit. There was just one problem. Sesame Street. Jim was adamant that the public access show and its now 20-year legacy were not up for grabs, assuring Sesame's producers the show would remain exactly as it was and would continue its goal of reaching and educating underprivileged children. What he wasn't aware of is Disney didn't see it that way, with internal memos dubbing the Henson acquisition as Project Big Bird. Though for a time, things were still running smoothly, as Jim and Disney executives would reach an agreement in August of 1989 which would be announced to the world days later. Just a few months later, at the start of 1990, things were very different, as Jim battled Disney's legal team on every term of the deal, became exhausted with Jeffrey Katzenberg and his condescending attitude towards the art of puppetry, and Michael Eisner's refusal to drop Sesame Street from the negotiations were getting under his skin. He had threatened to walk away multiple times, but was still determined to see this deal through as he continued working on new projects, including Part 3. Oh, yeah, this video is about a TV special. We open on the core Muppet cast arriving for vacation.
We are going to paradise!
Paradise.
The sheer range of Muppets included is of note because after the Muppet Show, it became difficult to get all the original Muppet performers together, with Frank Oz pursuing a career in film directing, Jim being stretched thin across various projects, and the rest of the group in Toronto working full-time on Fraggle Rock. In 1987, they had all reunited to create a Muppet Family Christmas, a cozy holiday special that brought together the Muppets, Sesame Street, and Fraggle Rock in a wholesome crossover event. The first time all the performers had worked together since 1984 with the Muppets Take Manhattan. Despite wanting to always be moving forward and never looking back, Jim couldn't help but occasionally long for the days when he didn't have to worry about running a company, where his most pressing concern was being silly and playful with his friends. But if this deal was to go through, he would be able to return to that. Already the sharp wit of Jerry Jules' writing and the comedic delivery of the Muppet performers is on full display.
He's so cute.
Oh, well, that's his job. You see, the rest of us got sick of being cute, so we hired him to do it.
Kermit has brought everyone to the swamp to introduce them to his relatives, sort of a meeting of his birth family and his found family, though things go off with many hitches, causing them all to ask why Kermit has brought them there for vacation.
Okay, I will tell you, and Piggy, it's gonna make you feel so good.
Can't make me feel worse.
Because today is the annual Frog Festival and Bug Fry.
Yeah, I feel worse.
And you're all invited.
Much worse.
Y'all are gonna love the festival.
And tonight after the bug fry, we're gonna sit around and listen to the fireworks from Walt Disney World.
Yep.
Walt Disney World.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot. Walt Disney World is just on the other side of those trees over there.
With that piece of information out there, the rest of the Muppets rush off to the gates of the happiest place on Earth. Moving to the entrance, just outside MGM Studios, we meet our primary guest star for the special, actor and comedian Charles Gordon, who'd previously played the villain in The Great Muppet Caper. Here he portrays the bumbling security guard Quinton Fitzwaller.
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, it was me who lost the 700 sets of keys to the Epcot front gate. But good news, sir. I went back and I found nearly 100 of them, so there's only 600 lost. Isn't that great?
The Muppets arrive at the front gate only to have no money for tickets, so they decide to just let themselves in anyway, leaving behind Kermit and Robin. From here, everyone splits off in pairs to either lead side plots or perform a series of gags, all with varying amounts of screen time. Meaning if I kept trying to go through the events of this special in order, it would become very tedious and disjointed. So instead, I'm going to isolate each character's individual segments and talk about them in order from least prominent to most prominent. Though I won't be talking about minor or cameo appearances who only show up once during the special or appear multiple times but don't contribute a lot. Don't worry, someday I'll make a video about the history of Bean Bunny and we can all be satisfied. Part 4. The dog days are over. Once being let loose in the park, Rolf is swiftly caught and taken to the pet care centre, which I looked up and is actually a real thing, so props to the special for teaching me something new. After Rolf is captured, we only cut back to him once for a musical number featuring Sprocket from Fraggle Rock and the cast of Dog City, a lesser known Henson property from around the same time. It is sad to see how little importance Rolf had even at this time, because he has perhaps the most storied history of any of the Muppets and played a large part in making them a household name. Rolf was created as part of the many marketing campaigns Jim and his friends made commercials for back in the early 60s, before being tossed in the cupboard till he was salvaged for a guest appearance on the Jimmy Dean Show. The audience loved Rolf though, and soon he became a major part of the show for the following 3 years, even going on tour with them. For the rest of the decade, Rolf and Kermit became the most frequently used and popular Muppet characters, receiving merchandise and helping to sell the initial concept for Sesame Street, though the dog would only make a brief appearance in the show's first season. The true turning point in Rolf's story came during production of The Muppet Show. Both he and Kermit were performed by Jim, and it had already been decided Kermit would be the main focal point of the series, the centre of this chaotic universe who would be featured in nearly every scene. Thus, the decision was made for the dog to take a slight back seat, being handed a new role as the Muppet Theatre's resident piano player, and of course the lead in the iconic Veterinarian's Hospital skit.
The continuing story of a quack who's gone to the dogs.
Even as Kermit, Piggy, Fozzie and Gonzo continued reaching new heights in their popularity, he had mostly been left behind. I do wish Rolf was given more to do in this special, especially since it was his final major appearance for the next 12 years. Since he was no longer as essential to the brand as Kermit, following Jim Henson's death, Rolf would only make small cameos with very little dialogue while the company figured out what to do with him, which was a time the character has never quite recovered from. Part 5. The House Band. Finding themselves in Epcot World Showcase, the Electric Mayhem decide to embark on a world tour across all pavilions in a music montage set to the fittingly named song Rocking All Around the World, written by Mark Radice, a song which highlights the theme of harmony and togetherness that defines the band. I've already gone into detail about the origins and development of all the band members in my Muppets Mayhem video, so you can watch that if you'd like to learn more about their individual evolution. The core idea though is that each of the band members are inspired by either a specific movement in music or a prolific performer from the 60s and 70s. Dr. Dr. Teeth takes after jazz keyboardist Dr. John, giving the piano player his gravelly voice and unique manner of speak-defying. Janice's creation was originally an homage to both Mick Jagger and Janis Joplin, though her final design bears little resemblance to either. And Sgt. Floyd Pepper was greatly influenced by the final years of the Beatles, being the most argumentative and opinionated of the band. An interesting note about the band is that this is the first, and to my knowledge, only time Clifford is depicted as another member. Clifford, who was played by Kevin Clash, made his debut as part of the Jim Henson Hour, making him one of the final new Muppet characters created during Henson's lifetime. And they were really trying to make this guy a thing for a while, even appearing alongside Kermit on the Arsenio Hall show to promote the special, though his inclusion in the band here does make sense. As mentioned, the original members were created and inspired by the music scene of the 60s and 70s, which they were now far removed from, and while still being great characters, were quickly becoming relics of a bygone era. So I can see the logic behind adding a newer, more modern band member, though what I find interesting is how he pretty much replaces Lips in this number, who, despite there clearly being a place designated for him on stage, only shows up randomly to join in with Zoot for a musical interlude halfway through the song. It makes me question if had the Disney deal gone through, would Clifford have become a permanent addition to the band, and how would have it affected their dynamics moving forward, especially with his presence likely pushing Zoot and Lips further into the background. Part 6. Good Grief, the Comedian's a Bear. Fozzie, the joke-telling Ursa, was one of several characters developed alongside the Muppet Show, though it became a struggle to define who he was, with him initially coming across as this more gruff figure with a perpetual grimace that it was difficult to find sympathy for, causing his puppet to be redesigned. In his struggles to mould Fozzie's personality, Frank Oz finally found humanity within him by emphasising his ineptness, which made him vastly more endearing. Unlike the other performers, Oz took this almost Stanislavskian approach to his characters, treating them as real individuals with fully fleshed out backstories, hopes and dreams, and in the case of Fozzie, that boiled down to a desire to be funny and loved. While they had successfully determined who Fozzie was, there was still a struggle in getting him to successfully mesh with the rest of the characters, until one day when a simple sketch between him and Kermit would at last bring the bear to life.
Hiya, hiya, hiya! You're a wonderful looking audience. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good grief, the comedian's a bear! You just said here.
That was the wrong here.
Which is the right here?
The other here!
The now iconic moment, which was hastily written and read through once minutes before going in front of a camera, is a testament to the talent and spontaneity of the original Muppet performers and writers, and like his fellow weirdos, would launch Fozzie into international stardom as Kermit's right-hand man and best friend. However, as previously mentioned, during the 80s, Frank Oz majorly stepped away from puppetry to focus on his true passion, directing, which meant Fozzie appearances in the following years would become increasingly more sporadic, especially with Oz's limited availability being split with his other, more important character. As such, Fozzie has a shockingly limited role in the special, only getting to interact with Kermit a few times, but mostly splitting off into his own storyline with Ma Bear, performed by Jerry Nelson, who was introduced in the second season of The Muppet Show. In their scenes, the pair attempt to busk for money in order to buy some refreshments, but as you can expect, Fozzie bombs with his jokes, especially when Statler and Waldorf show up. Eventually, Kermit finds him and suggests that he simply isn't playing to his audience.
Well, look over there. See, this is the Country Bear Jamboree. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, if you will, the one and only Fozzie Bear!
Yes, yes!
Fozzie's role in the special is an indicator of how much the world of the Muppets was changing, and the effect being split up was having on both the performers and their characters. The iconic Fozzie and Kermit dynamic had gone from being essential to almost non-existent, which was a problem Disney buying the Muppets would not have solved. And watching Jim and Frank's sparse interactions, you can tell how much they missed working together.
Hey, Fozzie, looks like you need some help.
Kermit! Oh, Kermit! It's so good to see you! Oh!
Part 7. OSHA violations. For this special, Muppet Labs are taken out of the studio in a subplot that has nothing to do with science whatsoever. So, get this. Beaker gets a bucket stuck on his head. That's it. Despite how nothing this storyline is, they keep cutting back to it, though it does include hints of that classic Bunsen and Beaker gay subtext.
I must say, Beaker, the wig is a big improvement. It gives you an exotic, almost sultry quality.
Dr. Bunsen Honeydew, performed by Dave Goelz, was introduced early in season 1 of The Muppet Show, with his shtick being he's an inventor so obsessed with his pursuits of technological advancements that he ignores any issues or potential side effects in the name of science. Throughout the first season, he would appear as either a solo act or perform a sketch with that week's guest star, though it soon became clear something was missing. The idea of the segment was great, but unlike other iconic sketches, it was solely focused on the gag without a compelling character dynamic to supplement it, which had its moments.
Yes, friends, how many times have you awakened at night in the dark and said to yourself, is there a gorilla in here?
But it could have used some additions. Thus, season 2 introduced the Doctor's hapless assistant, Beaker, performed by Richard Hunt, who became the victim of any oversight from their creations. As the franchise expanded to various other media, the duo would always show up whenever an invention was needed to progress the plot, but had little relevance outside of that. While the pair make up one of the most memorable Muppet Show acts, they pretty much only work within that original context, and when you remove them from the lab and have them do something not involving science, it is difficult to keep them entertaining without changing them. Case in point, the best they could come up with here was Beaker gets a bucket stuck on his head. Part 8, A Rodent Revolution. When talking about the development of Muppet characters, Rizzo the Rat is interesting because his rise to prominence almost feels like an accident. His origin is a face in the crowd from a random season 4 episode of The Muppet Show as part of a group of rats, though a few episodes later he would be given a name and continue to make regular appearances until the show's finale, leading to him being part of the ensemble of the Great Muppet Caper. His big break came in 1984's Muppets Take Manhattan, where he received a substantial supporting role, though I would argue this special was his most prominent appearance during the Henson era. Rizzo is the only Muppet Fitzwaller is able to catch on his own, so the security guard enlists him to help find the rest, essentially casting Rizzo as the sidekick to the antagonist, which is a role he fits into surprisingly well. While Rizzo had been steadily growing in notoriety during the 80s, he wouldn't officially be recognised as part of the primary Muppet cast until production began on 1992's The Muppet Christmas Carol, when writer Kirk Thatcher decided to pair him up with Gonzo to act as the film's Greek chorus, where a legendary dynamic was born that would continue for the rest of the decade. And speaking of Charles Dickens, Part 9, The Great Whatever. Of course it's Gonzo. Originally a throwaway Muppet in a mostly forgotten Christmas special, The Great Santa Claus Switch, that was simply referred to as Cigar Box Freckle. Dave Goelz had initially joined the Muppet Workshop as a puppet builder since he had no confidence in his skills as a performer despite how much Jim encouraged him, which he channeled into the thrill-seeking, lovable whatever that would become an essential part of this ensemble. Kermit might be the leader of this band of weirdos, but Gonzo is the weirdest of the weird. Gonzo believes he is a worthless creature. He knows it and believes it, but he wants to prove that he has worth. However, that idea wouldn't define Gonzo for long, as the more comfortable Dave Goelz got with performing, the closer he got to that spark that would ignite into the Gonzo we know and love, reveling in moments of intense joy and excitement as well as the passion he feels as an artist. While the patheticness and self-loathing of Gonzo would be significantly toned down in subsequent years, the depth and human-like quality would remain, as Gonzo became the most sentimental and reflective Muppet. His ridiculous acts became these nuanced emotional performances, leading to one of the best moments in any Muppet production, his song I'm Going to Go Back There Someday from the Muppet movie. A song about the bittersweetness of wanting to recapture a brief moment of happiness. What makes Gonzo work as a character is his authenticity, in that no matter what he's doing, he is fully committed and passionate towards it. He never has to hide or suppress any part of himself, he is always 100% authentic. And that is on display in the special. While the other Muppets head off to experience attractions and actually explore the park, Gonzo is fascinated by the unappreciated and minute. He's overjoyed to look at trash or experience the wonders of the underground laundromat because to him, all that is as exciting as the actual park.
Look what we've discovered.
Huh?
We're in a sewer. Boy, nothing can touch the magic of Disney.
Part 10, A Swine is Born. Miss Piggy is an homage to classic Hollywood divas from the golden age of cinema, with her extravagant wardrobe, exaggerated demeanour, and overly dramatic acting. But what endeared audiences to her was not her glamour, but her vaulting ambition and irrepressible self-confidence. But again, it all comes back to what makes her feel real. The brief moments of vulnerability where we receive a glimpse into who she really is. That her sophistication is a veneer that she puts on to mimic the star she's grown up with, because that's what she thinks she has to do to achieve the fame she wants. Her conviction and entitlement is a coping mechanism to cover up some deep-rooted insecurities. Despite her transformation to cultural icon during the early years in the Muppet Show, Miss Piggy was never meant to be a central figure in the main cast, starting out as merely a simple background role down to her having no assigned puppeteer, constantly changing hands between Frank Oz and Richard Hunt. But like most of the characters, it all came down to one spontaneous, inspiring moment that gave her life. To quote Frank Oz, "I was working with Miss Piggy with Jim, who was doing Kermit, and the script called for her to slap him. Instead of a slap, I gave him a funny karate hit. Somehow that crystallized her character for me, the coyness hiding the aggression." And a few years from then, Piggy had become the Muppet Show's breakout star, beloved by the world to a point where she had almost taken on a life of her own. As for her appearance in this special, here she is paired with Beauregard, the Muppet Theatre's janitor, as she wants to go visit the Chinese theatre, keeping with that aspiration for stardom and the glamour of Hollywood she desperately strives for, only to keep getting dragged onto thrill rides, including Big Thunder Mountain and Star Tours, the second time these three entertainment giants forebodingly crossed over, and the Mad Hatter's teacups, leaving her disheveled and once more letting her sophisticated mask drop.
We are now going to go straight to the Chinese theater at the Disney MGM lot, or else.
Well, perhaps I am a fool to ask, but or else what?
Part 11. The Missing Rainbow Connection. As is to be expected of a Kermit appearance, the Muppet ringleader spends a majority of the special attempting to locate and wrangle his friends together, failing to contain the chaos while also being on the run from park security, during which he runs into Raven Simone, who convinces him not to give up by singing Rainbow Connection to him, which I'm shocked people don't talk about more often. Kermit's storyline, and kind of the special as a whole, serves to highlight his importance to the cast, showing how lost and directionless the other characters become without him, and how, by himself, Kermit struggles to find purpose. He relates to the other characters on many different levels. More important, they have to relate to him. Without Kermit, they don't work. Nothing could happen without him. The other characters do not have what it takes to hold things together. One thing I want to discuss with Kermit is the idea that following Henson's death, the character became sanitized to a certain degree. That he lost his edge in order to become a more marketable mascot for the company, taking on this more quiet frustration as opposed to the sarcasm and explosive temper viewers became acquainted with on The Muppet Show. This is a narrative I too have perpetuated when talking about Steve Whitmire's performance, which I now regret, because I feel we have to acknowledge that Kermit was always sort of heading in this direction. You look at the final years of Henson performances compared to early Muppet Show episodes, and while there are glimpses of the more combative Kermit, you see this progression to a softer version that is closer to his Sesame Street appearances, which shouldn't be all too surprising since that was much closer to who Jim was as a person. And over the years of performing the character, Kermit had evolved into more of an extension of the man who created him. Part 12, the only part of this special people actually talk about. Once Kermit has reunited with Fozzie, they spot Animal chasing a Snow White walk-around character into the Indiana Jones stunt show spectacular and follow after him, pursued shortly after by the Electric Mayhem. Meanwhile, Beauregard tricks Piggy into also attending the show, where she and Kermit are soon picked out as the volunteers, with Miss Piggy as the sturdy peasant woman, and Kermit as the dashing hero.
I'd like to go on record as being opposed to the use of violence for purposes of conflict resolution. However,
this is the highlight of the special, as it feels the most like classic Muppet antics. The way Miss Piggy screams as she's thrown about and set on fire, Kermit not wanting to fight despite him already telling us the gun wasn't real.
I don't believe in violence. I don't believe in violence. You okay? Oh, good.
Then the iconic image of Piggy on the turrets.
Miss Piggy, how are we going to explain this to Big Bird?
It's simply some cool action while the characters play off each other beautifully. During this, all the other Muppets are able to reconvene till the end of the show, where Kermit and Miss Piggy escape an exploding truck and run straight into the arms of Fitzwaller, who rounds them all up. He gets on the phone with Mickey, who Kermit insists he is well acquainted with.
I didn't know you knew Mickey Mouse.
Sure, we're both members of FOSSA.
FOSSA?
Yeah, Fictional Animal Stars of America.
So a traditionally animated Mickey invites them all into his office, and Kermit introduces them all. Or at least everyone in the front row. Sorry, Rolf.
Where's Miss Piggy? Mickey, mon cher! Quel honor to meet vous!
How did she do that?
If there's one thing Piggy knows, it's how to make an entrance.
It's a good thing there's still recordings of this special available, otherwise you'd think it was a wild fever dream. Then Kermit and Mickey interact in this kinda goofy looking, yet still charming effect. The big finale is the Muppets putting their names and prints in the cement in front of the Chinese theatre, where they all sing the song More, More, More. Another song about show business that also carries this air of them saying, this is only the beginning. Then they return to the swamp to watch the fireworks, before realising they forgot something.
Hey, where's Miss Piggy? I hadn't seen her in the longest time.
No.
Oh, we left her at the Chinese theater. She was still standing in the wet cement, signing autographs and posing for pictures.
Oh no! Everybody back to Walt Disney World.
Yeah.
Emmy Lou, find us some pickaxes.
Come on, guys, let's go. We'll save you.
Help! Help! Help!
The Muppets at Walt Disney World is an odd duck of a special to a point where I consider it more of a pitch. It's essentially pitching the audience on the idea of combining the Muppets and Disney, and as such it has certain moments that feel more like a Muppet project than others. The core cast and performers are all in top form, the writing stays true to their history and development, and there are some good songs. Then other times, it's just Beaker with a bucket on his head walking past Star Tours and nothing more. I think the storylines that work best in the special are Miss Piggy and Gonzo. Piggy's does find that middle ground between Muppet antics and theme park advertisement, and the visual of her getting tossed about on all the rides never fails to make me smile. Then Gonzo's part works because it is decidedly not extravagant. They don't sacrifice anything about him to sell you Walt Disney World. Instead, he goes on a behind-the-scenes tour, essentially giving you a rare peek behind the curtain. But when all is said and done, you can look at this special and see just how much fun they were all having. Which, if I was talking about anything other than the Muppets, that would be a massive insult, but that's what made them successful in the first place. It was just a group of friends having fun and being playful together, and it's nice to know they got to do that one last time. Folks, thank you so much for sticking around to hear my thoughts on this special. Apologies for the lengthy delay, but a lot has happened since MomoCon. As you can probably tell, I moved house, so that has been a lot, but I am now fully back and ready to get on with some amazing stuff for the rest of the year, so stay tuned for that. Before we wrap this up, I first have a few announcements to get through. The first is, I started a new channel. It's called the Gladding Gladiator Straight to Home Video, my secondary channel that receives infinitely less time, resources, and money. Do you get it? This will be the new and permanent home for anything I don't consider my main content. So reaction videos, vlogs, unboxings, gaming, live streams, that sort of thing. If you head on over there right now, you can check out my MomoCon video and see all the exciting things I got up to in my first international solo trip, including visiting the Centre for Puppetry Arts. Other announcement is I have started uploading exclusive bonus videos to my Patreon and channel membership. These are short 5 to 15 minute videos that you can sort of consider spin-offs from my main content, talking about another topic related to a show or movie I've already discussed. I currently have 3 available: an analysis of the Bluey episode Sleepy Time, a discussion about the character of Tyler from Turning Red, and an explanation of why Sponge on the Run is my favourite SpongeBob movie. There'll be more dropping in the coming weeks, which I will post about on my community tab, so keep an eye out for those. Also available for Patreon and channel memberships is a sneak peek at my biggest project ever, a multi-hour retrospective on Bear in the Big Blue House that I will be dropping towards the end of the year, though I will be posting sections for early access as they are completed over the next few months. Supporting me via Patreon or channel memberships not only gives you guys access to a bunch of exclusive material, but also helps me devote more time and resources into making bigger and better videos for y'all. For instance, I'm planning to do a Wallace and Gromit retrospective later this year, which I have this really cool vision for. But it's also a very expensive vision. So if you want to help me make that video a reality, you can find links and buttons to my Patreon and channel membership down below. Until next time, I've been the Glad and Gladiator, and I'll see ya real soon.